Number 5. World War III. In his big book of predictions known as his quatrains, Nostradamus wrote that 7 months the Great War, people dead of evil doing. Rowan Evru shall not fall to the king. Now if you've watched any of our videos on Nostradamus, you'll know that he usually keeps his predictions pretty vague and cryptic, as a centuries-old mystic astrologer is wont to do. But here he's treating us to a prediction so easy to read, even I can follow along. Nostradamus predicts that there will be a great war, and that if the quatrain is anything to go off of, Europe will be the theater for the conflict. But in a small hope spot for the city of Rouen, France, they are not going to fall to the king. Good for them. That's the only city he specified is going to be okay. Now who could this king be referring to? A world leader? An army maybe? The mascot for Burger King? I know if any fast food mascot is going to start a world war, it is absolutely that guy, although Grimace has always been a wild card. Don't trust him even a little bit. Now obviously, jokes aside, this is a tense subject. The current situation in Europe is already a cause for serious global stress, and no one wants to see it develop any further, especially into a great war. Although that's a bit of a misnomer, isn't it? I'm not sure if great is the right word to describe any wars. Maybe in size, sure, but I don't think anyone involved in an international war would describe it to you as a great time. The quatrain doesn't specify when, but with the world watching Europe now, it's definitely on the back of all of our minds that we hope this doesn't come true. Let's take a break from bumming each other out talking about global conflicts. You having fun with the channel? Toss a subscribe our way to catch it all. Number 4. Asteroids. A great fire will fall from the sky for 3 nights. The cause will appear both stupefying and marvelous. Shortly afterwards, there will be an earthquake. Ever since a big rock wiped out the dinosaurs, I think it's been a little bit on the back of our minds worrying that maybe something like that might happen to us someday. If something is going to stop a T-Rex, I don't even feel a little bit confident about my odds. This quatrain here makes it seem like we've got to be watching the skies. And while I certainly hope this is just Nostradamus referring to the world's best 4th of July celebration and a whole long weekend fireworks session, people who spend a whole lot more time than me reading about Nostradamus theorize that this could be referring to an asteroid strike on our sweet blue planet, which is going to be both stupefying and marvelous, which honestly sounds very, very nice were it not for the earthquake. Lucky for us, and terrible for extinction event enthusiasts, sorry, our good friends at NASA have recently demonstrated their DART technology, short for Double Asteroid Redirection Test. And I gotta wonder how many acronyms they tried before landing on that one, because DART sounds so clean. It's a system in place to change the trajectory of asteroids. Successfully, no less. Just a few weeks ago, for the first time in humanity's history, we changed the path of a celestial object. So take that, Nostradamus. Bet you didn't predict we were gonna go to space to push something out of the way. And hey, asteroids? You think you're so tough? Well, take that, never-ending cosmos and unending might of the eternal stars. We're just gonna push you right out of the way. We don't care. Number 3, celestial fire. And before we move forward, we really gotta think of a nickname for this guy. Nostradamus is just a mouthful and a half. Mussy? No, that's way worse. Okay, never mind. We're just gonna keep calling him Nostradamus for now. You know what, if you ghouls and goblins can think of a good Nostradamus nickname, throw that down in the comments, because I am spending so much time saying this guy's name. Our favorite Farsi and Frenchman with no good nicknames wrote in his big book of predictions that there will be a celestial fire on the royal edifice. So what does that mean for us? What is a celestial fire if not a Destiny 2 melee ability? Warlocks are going to dominate a new Crucible map? It's unlikely, as Nostradamus' predictions on Destiny's meta have frequently been inaccurate, and most historians believe he actually would have played a Voidwalker instead of a Dawnblade. Experts in transcribing Nostradamus' work believe that this excerpt from his poetry could be referring to the destruction of the royal palace, with many believing it to refer to the royal family in the UK. So should King Charles put a big fireproof umbrella over Buckingham Palace? Some have suggested that this could be far more dramatic, referring to Buckingham Palace being completely destroyed and from its ashes a new power rising. The prophet continues to say that an unlikely alliance will occur of 2 great powers that will come together. Now, who would this new world order be? Benevolent, to lead us to a new golden age, or dark new overlords to oppress us all? It's always a possibility that it could be reptile people. Number 2, man-eating? No abbots, monks, no novices to learn. Honey shall cost far more than candle wax. So high the price of wheat, that man has stirred his fellow man to eat in his despair. Now, at first, this seems like the ramblings of an old man who just came back from Walmart and saw the price of honey and is going off on a tirade. But that little snippet about man eating his fellow man sticks out just a little bit, doesn't it? This prediction is pretty directly doomsaying, with our good friend and master of mysticism, Nostradamus, suggesting that in the future, things are going to get so bad that food is going to become so expensive that the common fella won't be able to afford any honey, wheat, or Honey Nut Cheerios, and will be pushed in desperation to start eating his fellow man. There really was not a lot going on back then if the scariest thing he could think of was honey getting so expensive that it would cause a full-on societal breakdown and cause us all to start eating man. You think they're gonna sell that in grocery stores? Obviously this one is a bit drastic as far as his predictions go, and definitely a bit scary unless you're the kind of person that watches The Walking Dead and wishes, gosh, I wish that was me. And if you are, you should probably talk to someone, they just want to help. But there is some truth to this. Prices of basic groceries are going up and up every year. I mean, you can walk into the Walmart and see the price of honey yourself, with inflation creeping its ugly little head a little more each year. It's been a consistent concern as well that bees are going to go extinct in our lifetime, with the population of honeybees declining rapidly yearly. For our sake and the bees, we need to do something to save the planet, if not just for the ecosystem and the planet as a whole, but also because apparently if we run out of honey, that's the first thing that causes us to all start going Texas Chainsaw Massacre on each other. Number 1. Great Discord. The trumpet shakes with great discord, an agreement broken, lifting the face to heaven. The bloody mouth will swim with blood. The face anointed with milk and honey lies on the ground. Like most of Nostradamus' writings, this one sounds a bit like the opening monologue to one of the Lord of the Rings movies. And wow, hey, honey again. Honey was a really serious cause of concern for this guy. I think if nothing else, Nostradamus took his morning tea incredibly seriously. So besides crying over spilled milk and honey, what do the experts have to say about this one? Was Nostradamus banned from his Discord server and writing out against the tyrannical mods? Well, like most of the predictions on this list, this unnerving quatrain seems to suggest that dire violence will plague us, with unrest between the classes leading to full-scale rebellion and riots. This little ditty seems to support that, with Nostradamus writing that sooner and later you will see great changes made, dreadful horrors and vengeances. Well, I don't know about you, but I support great changes definitely, though I'm a little less sure about dreadful horrors and vengeances. The last few years have seen more civil unrest than ever, with it seeming like there's a mass-scale protest or riot every couple of weeks somewhere in the world. It's easy to flick on the news and see that and wonder if it's eventually going to hit a boiling point, and when it does, if we'll see some serious changes, or at the very least, some positive progress towards the price of honey. Because I'm really not looking to get eaten by anyone anytime soon. I'm just, look at me, I'm so twiggy, I will barely even make a good snack. Just pass me over, okay? Number 5, Mars landing. Among his many criticisms, Nostradamus wrote a light on Mars failing. Now initially, it seems like just a vague statement, until you remember that a few years ago, the Opportunity rover, which was traveling through Mars, broadcasted its last message from the surface of the red planet. Its last message read, "My battery is low and it's getting dark," which was the final transmission received from the Opportunity rover to NASA when the solar-powered robot was caught in a massive dust storm, described as one of the biggest dust storms observed on Mars, which engulfed the planet whole and turned the day into night, smothering the poor robot's battery, leading it to send that final, poignant transmission. Now, could this be the light on Mars failing that Nostradamus was referring to? It's hard to argue that it doesn't match up just a little bit eerily. I mean, come on, a light on Mars failing and here you have a sad robot saying that its battery is dying out. Of course, this won't be the end of mankind's journey to the red planet. Succeeding the Opportunity rover is the Curiosity rover, which is currently roving around the rock right now as you watch this video. Elon Musk, billionaire and Twitter poster, has made no secret whatsoever of his goals for Mars, calling it his life's greatest work and a mission central to humanity. SpaceX has made several of their own predictions about sending men to Mars, with their earliest estimates being that by 2030 we will have manned crews walking the surface of Mars. One has to wonder if Nostradamus could have ever predicted man walking on the surface of another planet. It's hard for us to imagine that, but Musk and his company insists it'll be sooner than we think. Now, Nostradamus also predicted back in his book of prophecies that you would subscribe to Top 5 Scary for the best scary stories and content on the web. Was he right? Because I'm pretty sure he was right. Number 4, civil unrest. In that big old book of chilling quatrains, our good friend Nostradamus had this to write. The trumpet shakes with great discord, an agreement broken, lifting the face to heaven, the bloody mouth will swim with blood, the face anointed with milk and honey lies on the ground. Probably the most outright sinister sounding of any of Nostradamus' prediction, unless the trumpet shaking with great discord just means there's going to be an awesome marching band parade going through the world. This one could mean a lot, but analysts and experts of Nostradamus' work generally agree that they think this is predicting a time of great civil unrest, dated for 2022. In the last couple years, we've already seen more civil unrest globally than we have before, with protests all over the globe for a number of social causes and pressing concerns. It's not unlikely at all to think that this sleeping discontent in the masses is going to keep rising, and it's very likely there will be more protests. This could tie in with a point we made in the previous Nostradamus video, in which he highlighted a prediction for 2022 that said he believed that inflation and starvation would rise so much that so high the price of wheat that man is stirred to his fellow man to eat in his despair. Now obviously that could be taken literally, and I sincerely hope not, because I don't think I would taste good at all. I'm a bit stringy and I eat terribly, so I would be awful for your diet. No, instead, myself and others think that it's alluding to the eat the rich sentiment and movement, and that these two predictions are linked together. You know, we've already seen so much unrest and so many protests for years from people struggling to get by, and as wages stay the same and working conditions worsen across the globe, it's increasingly worrisome that maybe someday it's all boiling into something really, really big. Finishing off in the original quatrain, Nostradamus wrote, "Sooner and later, you will see great changes made, dreadful horrors and vengeances." So maybe there's some positivity out of it, you know, some great changes. Maybe we'll all get a 4-day weekend. We just have to ignore the dreadful horrors, I guess. Number 3, a world at war. War! What is it good for? Absolutely nothing, I think, is the usual accepted answer. Well, that good-for-nothing horseman of the apocalypse is always rearing its head, and Nostradamus predicted that we'd be experiencing a lot of them. A passage reads, "Blue head shall white head harm in such degree, as France's good to both shall e'er amount." Now, I gonna be honest with you, I have no idea what that means. That doesn't really sound like much, unless there's a war of blue-headed people. I found one reading saying that this was predicting that France would be beaten at the World Cup, which is definitely possible, but I feel like Nostradamus would shoot a little higher than making sports bets. Most analysts seem to think that this points towards a war, so take a listen to this passage as well. This one reads, "7 months the great war, people dead of evil doing. Ruin ever shall not fall to the king." Now this prediction spells it out a little more clearly. Nostradamus thinks that there's going to be a great war that will spill over and into Europe, and that France will be a key player and a battleground for it. It's easy to see why this prediction could ring true, especially with how things are, going the way they are right now. There's already enough tension brewing, and I think the threat of a world war is something that's kind of looming in the back of everyone's minds already while we watch the news. While there is always a war burning somewhere across this globe, this prediction specifically outlines that this could evolve into something much, much bigger. Into a great war, possibly, instead of one of those humble good ones. I'm joking, of course, there are no good ones. Possibly involving the entire planet in a global conflict. And while I'm sure a great war might make for a few good Hollywood action movies years after the fact, I think we should all work to avoid a third world war. Most trilogies usually have a really disappointing third one, you know? Let's just hope for our sake that Nostradamus isn't accurate on this one. Number 2, an asteroid. "A great fire will fall from the sky for 3 nights. The cause will appear both stupefying and marvelous. Shortly afterwards, there will be an earthquake." I doubt Nostradamus had ever seen fireworks, so the prediction of this being that we're all gonna have a great party with fireworks for 3 days and then we're gonna party so much it'll rumble the earth, I don't think that's super likely. No, fire from the sky and earthquakes are never a good thing. That's usually kind of the symptoms of like apocalyptic stuff, alongside boiling seas and demon walking the earth, fire raining down. Now this line could refer to a couple things, possibly. It could be alluding to something man-made, like a strike of some kind. But translators and experts of Nostradamus' writings believe that this could be referring to an asteroid strike on the planet with devastating impact. Asteroids pass by the Earth every single day already, and the likelihood of one colliding with the planet and causing serious damage is a real possibility, and all of us going the way of the dinosaurs. Fortunately for us, NASA has been cooking up predictions of their own, and they assure us that there is no danger of any collisions on record for 2022, or for the next 600 years, for that matter, claims a recent study. The asteroid Apophis was said to be flying worryingly close to Earth's orbit, on track for a possible collision in 2029, and as well, a slight risk of collision in 2068. But thankfully, continued monitoring and updated scans have shown that everything should be all clear for the next 100 years. Nice to know that the seer can get wrong every once in a while, you know? Keeps him humble. Of course, there is always the possibility, like I mentioned, that great fire falling from the sky could be referring to something a little darker than an asteroid. Like I said, maybe something man-made or something a bit more cosmic, like say a celestial fire of some kind. Speaking of celestial fires, actually funny, that's so funny, I was just talking about celestial fires earlier. Let's get on to the next point, which is number 1, Celestial Fire and the New World Order. Celestial Fire and the New World Order sounds like they would have been the absolute coolest 80s prog rock supergroup. I bet their first album was fantastic and the rest of them fell off. Disregard that fantasy for a minute and let's get back to the topic at hand. Nostradamus' predictions. In his big old book of prophecies, Nostradamus wrote that there would be a celestial fire on the royal edifice. So what does that mean? King Charles's house is about to catch fire? Well, something about the word celestial really throws this one for me. You know, celestial is not an adjective that you just toss in willy-nilly. I feel like that's reserved for when something is descending from the cosmos, end of days, apocalypse stuff. Well, not to worry, this prediction gets worse. They always get worse. The prediction goes on to state that through the ashes of this celestial fire on the royal edifice will rise a new order, hey, another prog rock group, and that an unlikely alliance between two great powers will come together. What those two great powers could be, though, is anyone's guess. Is it Marvel and DC? Apple and Android? Coke and Pepsi? Whoever it may be, it's said that things will never be the same and the alliance's effect will not be good for us. Now, Nostradamus wrote many predictions on the royal family, and some even claim that he accurately predicted Queen Elizabeth's passing. He had this to add on about King Charles specifically. Because they disapproved of his divorce, a man who they later considered unworthy, the people will force out the king of the islands, a man will replace who never expected to be king. Could this be referring to King Charles being replaced in favor of a new king? Could this be related to this new world order Nostradamus is predicting, with someone no one ever expected to be king, and that unlikely alliance getting formed? We're not sure yet, but as time goes on, more and more of Nostradamus' predictions keep turning out to be true, so we'll find out soon enough, I'm sure, and you'll find out here. Number 5, the Queen and the royal family.
Golden thread running through the generations. That's how one of Queen Elizabeth II's many prime ministers described her reign. The longest in British history.
One of the most concerningly accurate predictions our boy Michelle predicted was that in 2022, Queen Elizabeth would pass and her son would take her place, but abdicate his position. In his original writings in 1555, Nostradamus wrote, "At the end of the war, the great powers change. Near the shore, 3 beautiful children are born, ruin to the people when they are of age, to change the country's kingdom and see it grow no more. The children are Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip's grandchildren, Prince William, Henry, and Princess Beatrice." The conflict could refer to the 1982 Malvinas War between the UK. Princess Diana gave birth to William 7 days after the war ended. Could Nostradamus be claiming that the end of Queen Elizabeth could be the end of the monarchy? Well, another writing of his adds to that. Check this out. Because they disapproved of his divorce, a man who later they considered unworthy, the people will force out the king of the islands, and a man will replace him who never expected to be king. Now, if you're like me and you struggle a bit to decipher centuries-old riddles, there are experts like Mario Reading, a British author, to do it for us. Reading explains the thinking, writing that after the Queen's death, Prince Charles will be crowned and become king of the islands. That part's already happened. However, a certain proportion of the British population, following his divorce from Diana, still persists that the pressure on him is so great and his age so much against him that Charles will agree to abdicate in favor of his elder son, Prince William. So it sounds like before he was even born, Nostradamus could sense that no one wanted King Charles. That obvious, huh? And hey, here's a prediction from me. By the end of this video, you'll subscribe to Top 5 Scary for scary videos every day and the best host in the game. I got a strong feeling I'm right. Here's an ominous one for you.
Humans, it says, are without doubt responsible for global warming and will pay an ever-increasing price. That includes more of what we've already seen this year: parched fields, forests on fire, and deadly heat.
Like the sun, the head shall sear the shining sea. The Black Sea's living fish shall all but boil. When Rhodes and Genoa half-starved shall be, the local folk to cut them up shall toil. Well, thankfully, we're not quite at the point of literal boiling fish in the sea, but that's not to say we're not rapidly approaching that reality. It's easy to interpret, Like the sun, the head shall sear the shining sea, as a warning for the increasing rise in temperatures we've seen across the globe this year. 2022 has already been a record-breaking year for climate change, and not in a way that's particularly good for anybody. July of 2022 was one of the hottest months globally, among the top 10 hottest in global history. But it's fine, I'm sure. We just need to walk to work a little bit more, use paper straws, and we'll really get a handle on this thing. The death of coral reefs, eradication of natural habitats, and the worrisome decline in fish populations worldwide could all point to Nostradamus being right about this one, predicting boiling fish and the common folk starving. Not trying to scare you too much, but some experts predict that if we keep going at the rate we're at, the world's oceans could be totally empty of all fish by 2048. For my own sake, I sincerely hope Nostradamus is wrong about us in this one, because if I'm ever at a pub and I can't get a clam chowder or fish and chips, I just don't know that any of this will be worth it anymore. Number 3. Man, did this guy only ever predict depressing stuff? Could he not have just predicted just once that maybe it would be beautiful weather year-round, the Leafs would have a good season, and the McRib would come back? No, sadly it was mostly doom prophecies. Check this one out. No abbots, monks, no novices to learn. Honey shall cost far more than candle wax. So high the price of wheat that man is stirred, his fellow man to eat in despair. International political instability, the pandemic, and Brexit have all contributed pretty nefariously to inflation. And let me tell you, as a guy who struggles to balance his checkbook, it has been a nightmare finding cheap honey. I'm serious, go on Amazon right now. Google raw honey and candle wax. Of all the things for a sage to be completely accurate on, I wasn't expecting it to be the economics of honey and wax, but hey, it's real. This is a personal issue I'm gonna have to set aside for now. But one has to wonder too with the phrase, his fellow man to eat in despair. Did Nostradamus have some insight into the popularity of the Eat the Rich movement? Well, that's always been a popular thing to spray paint over a bank wall or write on a poster board to take to a protest. After the pandemic, that sentiment has been more pronounced than ever in recent years, with large swaths of the population rightfully being upset about wage and income disparity that exists. It's hard enough for the common man to make a living out there, let alone being able to afford good, reliable honey. And if you know a supplier for that, drop a link please. My DMs are always open to talk honey. Number 2. If you asked me 5 years ago to predict what the future of finances would look like, I don't think I ever would have guessed the rise of NFTs or cryptocurrency. I mean, I don't think anyone could have estimated that we'd ever have an economy based around trading pictures of bored apes wearing sailor hats. Well, except of course Nostradamus could have predicted it, because he predicts everything. Could the French seer have predicted cryptocurrency? Take a quick listen to this. The copies of gold and silver inflated, which after the theft were thrown into the lake, at the discovery that all is exhausted and dissipated by the debt, all scripts and bonds will be wiped out. Recently, gold has been surging, and a whole wave and movement was born around moving towards cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, as a new infallible gold standard. Waves of Silicon Valley engineers and executives have left their high-level positions to pursue cryptocurrency startups, and the push to try and decentralize currency and move towards cryptocurrency has been very real in recent years, and growing more and more. Could we really move away from physical cash altogether? Especially after the pandemic, we've seen more and more businesses and operations move towards cashless transactions altogether, moving towards all of our money being stored digitally, which stresses me out a lot because I have a hard time enough managing money when it's in front of me, let alone when it's imaginary. Maybe it's a lot to ask that Nostradamus could have predicted so much the idea of digital currency, but there's a lot to think about as ideas of a new form of currency taking shape. I've got to say though, if he really was as much of a prophet as they say he was, he would have invested in Bitcoin early, started seeing those real profits. Number 1. Keeping on his predictions about the technology of the future, could Nostradamus have predicted the rise of AI and the looming threat of a technological takeover? Honestly, more likely than you think. Feast your ear holes on this little stanza. The moon in the full of night over the high mountain, the new sage with a lone brain sees it, by his disciples invited to be immortal. Eyes to the south, hands in bosoms, bodies in the fire. Now, this does sound a little bit like something a wizard in a cave might whisper you over a crystal ball before sending you on a journey, but bear with it. Some experts firmly believe that this could be an allusion to the rise of the digital era. The new sage with a lone brain sees it by his disciples invited to be immortal. I don't want to stroke his ego too much by referring to them as sages, but Mark Zuckerberg has made it incredibly clear that he believes the future of the world and humanity as a whole is going to be virtual in his quest to create the metaverse, creating a world world where literally the body will be left behind. Bodies in the fire, invited to be immortal. Do you think we could get to an era where we start living like we're in the Matrix? Uploading our consciousness to a digital realm? What was once pure fantasy is encroaching on our reality closer and closer with each passing day, and I honestly think it'll be sooner than we're expecting before we're all living in that digital world. Number 5. War. What is it good for? 7 months the Great War, people dead of evil doing. Ruin ever shall not fall to the king. Now, if you've watched any of our previous videos on Nostradamus and other end-of-the-world prediction-style videos, you know that Nostradamus and the other seers tended to keep their predictions pretty vague, but sometimes they spelled it out simple enough that even a simpleton like me can follow along. Nostradamus is predicting a big war, a great war even, in size, not in quality. I don't think there was ever a great war. If the quatrain is anything to go off of, Nostradamus predicts that the war will erupt across Europe and then ravage the countryside, while hopefully keeping the city of Rouen, France in a good spot, and will refuse to fall to the king. Now that part is open to a little bit of interpretation, because really that could mean anything. Who could the king be referring to? Is it one particular world leader? One nation vying for power? Is it the Burger King mascot who's finally snapped and is on a warpath of world domination? He's easily the most unhinged and dangerous of all fast food mascots, and the one I would most expect to start a war. Now, this is obviously a delicate subject, but the current situations across Eastern Europe is already cause for enough alarm. A war that's got everybody on their toes and watching the news constantly. And I don't think anyone wants to see it develop further into a proverbial Great War. A 7-month Great War sounds like it'd be over in a flash, but I think the last thing anyone wants is a war that's over in a flash, knowing the nuclear-powered arsenals out there. Shorter war is not necessarily a good thing. Nuclear annihilation is kind of the last thing anybody needs out there. Hey, hope I'm not bumming you out too much, talking about global conflicts and possibly the end of the world. Let's talk about something fun, like our fun channel. We got all sorts of scary content of just about any topic you can think of. So click through, stay scared, but stay watching this video, because we got a whole lot more predictions left to go. Number 4, Mars and Elon Musk. Listen to this quatrain. The two contenders will unite together. When most others unite with Mars, the African leader is fearful and trembles. The dual alliance is separated by the fleet. This one seems too perfect, you know? Immediately as I read that quatrain, maybe you made the same connection too. Mars, African leader. Immediately coming to my mind is Elon Musk, the South African billionaire tycoon who currently owns Twitter and has been extremely outspoken about his desire to flee this planet and to become the king and colonize the red planet of Mars. But who are these two contenders that have to unite together? Could it be referring to global superpowers coming together for the future of humanity? Or is it Facebook and Twitter coming together and he's just looking to buy more social medias? Some professional followers of Nostradamus' work, such as Lori Reading, has argued in favor of this as well, arguing that this is referring to the billionaire's plans for galactic domination. Another quatrain seems almost connected with this line from another verse. Take a listen. The light of Mars shall go out. Could this be again a reference to the mission? A suggestion that perhaps this dream of Mars is just that, a foolish dream, and that a colony on Mars would fail in upon itself. It also links up bizarrely well with the Opportunity rover. If you remember that from a few years back, the little guy who was rolling around the surface of Mars, its last transmission was, "My battery is fading and I'm going dark," which is almost like directly saying a light of Mars is going out. This is actually starting to creep me out here. Nostradamus might have been magic just a little bit. Time will tell, obviously, if this one remains to be true, although after Twitter, I don't know. I'm not so sure. I don't know if I want to pay $8 a month to subscribe to Mars Blue for a checkmark. Number 3, more plague. Oh, that's the last thing any of us need. Well, take a listen to this doom prophecy. Near the gates and within 2 cities, there will be 2 scourges, the likes of which has never seen. Famine within plague, people put out by steel, crying to the great immortal God for relief. Well, this doesn't sound fun at all. I'm not sure anybody wants this. I'm pretty sure everyone watching this has experienced more than enough plagues to last us a lifetime. Of course, it's unfortunately kind of foolhardy to think that humanity will never experience another viral epidemic because, well, germs are always going to exist unless we eradicate them entirely. So all we can do is brace ourselves for the next one and hopefully learn from the past. I mean, that's why we're looking all the way back to an old French astronomer who was writing things in the 15th century, and the off chance that any of it might help us out. Well, He might be on the money with this one again, because recently in 2021, researchers in Siberia uncovered in a block of ice 33 strains of ancient novel viruses. Now, novel means that they haven't been discovered before, not that they're just kind of fun and no trivia. Personally, I would put them back in the iceberg, I think, and then I would put like a tarp or maybe some tape over it. I think we should just deal with that where it is, and we should not be bringing any ancient prehistoric viruses into today's times. I think I'm good. Now, what really concerns me about this quatrain is the picture that it paints. Near the gates and within 2 cities, the people will be put out by steel, crying to the great immortal god for relief. Oh, that's dramatic. Could this be a reference to some power taking out its own citizens? Armies firing at infected individuals? Now, it could be that, but it could also be possible that Nostradamus somehow had a powerful vision into the future, and he was just watching an episode of The Last of Us, and he was basing his predictions around that. Good on him for not spoiling that series for 500 years. Number 2, economic crisis. Take a listen to this. No abbots, monks, no novices to learn. Honey shall cost far more than candle wax. So high the price of wheat that man is stirred to eat his fellow man in despair. Now, I'm not an economist. I'm a YouTuber, sort of. But I don't need to be an economist to tell you that things have been getting pretty expensive and everyone's feeling their purse strings tighten up. I can't tell you how many times this week I've had pasta with no sauce for dinner. Admittedly, I don't buy a ton of honey or candle wax, so I can't really comment on how accurate that all is, but I can definitely tell you that my weekly groceries are getting a lot more expensive. The fear, of course, here is that I think eating your fellow man in despair really does not sound like the good option. Now, there are a couple different ways we could take this interpretation. We could take it very literally, suggesting that things are going to get so dire and so bad that we'll have so little food to go around that we're forced to consume one another to survive, which really doesn't sound pleasant. And while I'm talking, I'd just like to throw out here, I am way too stringy to be valuable as meat. I mean, look at me, I'm like a bird, I'm hollow, so I wouldn't make a good meal out of me at all, so don't even bother trying over here. Alternatively, it could be interpreted in a more esoteric way. And since he's an old astronomer, I'm sure he spoke esoterically most of the time. He could be referring to the idea of eating the rich. If people get so fed up with the costs of living on just about everything and decide to revolt and strike back at the people in charge, hoping to dismantle the systems in place, which, hey, funny enough, actually leads into a segue for my next point really well. It's almost like I set that up. Number 1, great discord. Take a listen. The trumpet shakes with great discord, an agreement broken, lifting the face to heaven. The bloody mouth will swim with blood, the face anointed with milk and honey lies on the ground. Like most of Nostradamus' writings, this one does sound a bit like it's the opening monologue to one of the Lord of the Rings movies, and wow, honey again. Honey was like a really serious cause of concern for this guy. I think he might not have been an astronomer. He might just have been a man who took his morning tea incredibly seriously. So besides crying over spilled milk and honey, what do our great Nostradamus experts have to say about this one? Was Nostradamus banned from his Discord server and writing against the tyrannical mods? Well, like all of the ones on this list, this unnerving prediction seems to suggest that dire violence will come to plague us, with unrest between the masses and classes leading to full-scale rebellion and riots. This little ditty seems to support that, with Nostradamus writing that sooner and later you will see great changes made, dreadful horrors and vengeances. Well, I support great changes, definitely. I'm a huge fan of great changes, but I am not so sure about dreadful horrors and vengeances. I feel like I've seen more than enough of those. The last few years have seen more civil unrest than ever. Like, this is the most upset I've seen people in my life, at least. With it seeming like that somewhere around the world there's a mass scale protest or riot every couple of weeks. You know, it's easy to flick on the news and you see that and wonder if eventually we're gonna hit a boiling point and we'll see some of those horrifying horrors and vengeances and all those mal thoughts that he was thinking up. And when it does, if we'll see some serious changes, or hey, at the very least, maybe some positive progress towards the price of honey, because apparently that's the most important cause in the world.